strengthening the feet and ankles is absolutely critical. The foot and ankle region plays a huge role in our stability and balance. The stress to the hip is much less. You'll actually decrease the likelihood of injuries. Hey guys, Dr. Joel Seedman here. In today's video, we're going to be talking about everything related to the feet and ankles and the toes and why they're so important for human performance and why you should actually care about this topic. And the feet and ankles, if you think about it, it's really our contact point that we have with the ground. It's where activation and where our signaling begins. Now, this also means that without proper foot and ankle mechanics or proper foot and ankle function, you really can't do any exercise correctly, whether that's squats, deadlifts, lunges, even your walking and running mechanics are going to be off to varying degrees. So this explains why we need to be concerned about how our feet and ankles and the foot and ankle complex is functioning, not just in daily living, but also during our strength training. Something else to consider is the foot and ankle complex is one of the most sophisticated regions of the body. There's over 30 joints, over 30 muscles, and thousands of nerve endings. So just from that alone, you can understand the implications this has all the way up the kinetic chain. And the research does show that how our feet and ankles fire and how they activate impacts everything up the kinetic chain. So it doesn't just rely on what happens down here. It goes all the way up. Those signals transfer even into the upper extremities. I want to go ahead and dive into the 7 areas of research and science behind this topic of foot and ankle activation. And in my opinion, the best research paper, the best literature on this was done in 2021 by Dr. David LaPlaca, and I just so happen to be a co-author on that myself, and it's in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research from the NSCA, which is the National Strength and Conditioning Association. This is probably the most comprehensive piece of literature that we have on this topic of foot and ankle training, so I'm going to be referencing that in this video. I'll have the link below. And within that actual article, there are dozens of references, I think 80 plus scientific studies that we mentioned within that study. I want to talk about the implications of injuries when discussing the feet and ankles. So we have kind of 2 areas here. The first one is direct injuries to the foot and ankle region. And we see this a lot in sports. One of the most common types of injuries in athletes is actually injuries to the actual foot and ankle region or to their toes. We have things like Achilles tendonitis, we have shin splints, Achilles tendinopathy, Achilles ruptures, we have ankle sprains, we have turf toe, all these different types of injuries and inflammation that happen to the foot and ankle region simply because the feet and ankles are not functioning properly, they're not doing their job. So with improved or enhanced foot and ankle function, we can actually decrease the likelihood of injuries. But there's also a lot of literature on the impact that the feet and ankles have on other regions of the body. So these are kind of the indirect injuries. A good example of this would be something like valgus knee collapse when someone is squatting, or even if someone is on the athletic field and they turn and they cut and their knee caves in. Well, if they have naturally more ankle pronation, their ankles tend to cave in, guess what's going to happen to their knees? Their knees are more likely to cave in and collapse. It's called a valgus ankle or valgus knee collapse, and usually they kind of go hand in hand. If you have the valgus collapse in your ankles or in your arches, where your arches collapse in, your knees are more likely to collapse in. So we can see the implications this has on ACL injuries. Almost 100% of the time someone has an ACL injury, you can actually see that the foot and ankle complex gave out in addition to some of the muscles around the knees and hips. So for injury purposes, strengthening the feet and ankles is absolutely critical. Point number 2, a lot of people don't realize how much foot and ankle strength plays into strength all the way up the kinetic chain, especially when we're talking about lower body movements like squats or deadlifts or lunges. If you want to increase your strength in your legs, you want to maximize your leg development, it's actually largely dependent not just on how well your big muscles in your legs are firing, but also the small muscles in your feet and ankles. So if you want to improve your strength in all the extremities, especially your legs, strengthen your feet and ankles. Point number 3, the research is pretty clear on this, that increasing or improving foot and ankle activation actually promotes enhanced power, speed, and agility and other markers of athletic performance. And so some of the things they looked at in the literature was when individuals go through training programs that emphasize foot and ankle strength, they see improvements in broad jump, vertical jump, Other measures of agility and speed, like even a 5-yard dash, which I know sounds kind of like a weird test, but it's largely dependent on how well those smaller muscles of the lower body are firing. So again, if you want increased power and speed, train those feet and ankles. Point number 4, and as mentioned earlier, we have thousands of nerve endings in our feet and ankles. And the implications here are that we have a lot of proprioception and sense of feel or kinesthetic awareness. Again, these all mean the same thing. That's that sense of feel that I've discussed in other videos. What that means in terms of our lower body mechanics is that if we have better sense of feel, we can understand or tune in to what's going on with our lower extremities better. That means we can fine-tune our body positioning better, and we can have more enhanced biomechanics because we can feel if things are off. We can feel if we're turning, we can feel if we're compensating or shifting. That all starts with the foot and ankle mechanics. Point number 5, the foot and ankle region plays a huge role in our stability and balance. If you look at someone who has good balance, they have good control of their body, they don't lose balance easily, oftentimes they have much better functioning foot and ankle complex regions in their lower extremities, and individuals who struggle with their balance, they tend to fall more, they tend to lose control over their body, they don't have as good of motor control. Oftentimes it comes back to their feet and ankles, they're not as developed and they're not as strong. So if you want better balance, you want better stability, a strong, sturdy foundation, strengthen your feet and ankles. Point number 6, one of the biggest implications that improving foot and ankle strength has on human performance is enhanced running mechanics or enhanced gait technique. And this goes back to sprinting or running. And the research is pretty clear on this as well. Again, you can go back to that literature review that we're going to have linked below with those 80+ references that I co-authored. But I want to just read a few things directly from the research itself in terms of what happens to our running mechanics when we have improved ankle function, and also when we focus more on doing things in barefoot conditions versus traditional shoes. And we're going to get to that in just a little bit. But some of the benefits here, we have improved proprioception with our running mechanics. That means we have better sense of feel with our running. We have decreased abnormal joint torques at the hip. That means when we're improving our barefoot mechanics or we're improving our foot and ankle function, the stress to the hip is much less. You also have better toe movement. You also have increased ankle motion, which is important for that plantar flexion and ankle dorsiflexion of those strides. It's how we basically create motion. It starts with the foot and ankle complex. We also have more evenly distributed pressures on the foot. So instead of having too much pressure on one portion of the foot, it's more evenly distributed throughout the entire foot. There's also increased stride frequency and decreased stride length. Now, this is important for any athlete because the research is pretty clear on this as well, that you don't want to be overstriding. Overstriding or using excessively long stride lengths, that leads to a lot of issues. That's oftentimes how people pull their hamstrings or their hip flexors, or even it can contribute to decreased speed and performance. So by having slightly more compact strides, which is associated with this improvement in barefoot or foot mechanics, you actually have improved running efficiency, and it also goes back to having more stride or increased stride frequency and decreased stride length. And then finally, you have decreased ground contact time. That means you spend less time in the ground, again, for sprinting. That's what we want. And you have improved running efficiency. You actually are more efficient with your running mechanics. You're using less energy to get the job done. With improved foot and ankle function, you actually have enhanced mobility throughout the entire body, but especially in the foot and ankle region, which makes sense. Dorsiflexion, or your ability to pull your ankle upwards, your foot upwards, that is a very important characteristic to enhance your squat performance as well as your sprinting, your running, jumping. And the research shows that improved foot and ankle strength improves our dorsiflexion capabilities. And again, the implications for pretty much every type of athletic maneuver, pretty huge for that. So those are the 7 reasons why you want to train your feet and ankles. Stay tuned because we're going to have another video that goes into the practical application of what proper foot and ankle mechanics look like for your daily training purposes.